Excellencies, colleagues from Foreign Ministry, it's really a great pleasure for me today to join you all and speak on the theme of partnership for progress. While it is a tough place, the world needs to see progress. And the answer to progress in a tough place are partnerships. So today, what I would like to do is to present to you the importance of partnerships to realize progress in a tough world. Now, before I do that, Ambassador, you triggered some thoughts about Awadh. Awadh, for those of you who are not familiar, it's an important, historically very wealthy part of India in the north along plains. Many Indo-Surinames trace their ancestry back to Awadh. But the reference in my book had a particular meaning. And the meaning derived from a very famous movie by film director Satyajit Ray. In that movie, in this very rich province, very rich state, two nobles of that state are engrossed in a chess game. In fact, the movie itself is called Chess Players. And while they are engrossed entirely in the chess game, the lessons of Awadh was a phrase meant to say, don't be oblivious to what is happening. And in a world which I said is a tough place, yes, to all the challenges in the world, all the complexity, all the issues which in one way or the other can impinge on our personal futures, who were so engrossed by themselves, eventually saw their kingdom taken over, and with all the attendant consequences, which was an enormous impoverishment, richest kingdoms of India, and consequently, many people who were sent out to the world as indentured labor. So with that lesson in mind, let me now come back to my topic, and let me start with the state of this tough world. So why do I use that word, tough world? Think about the world. Let's use a cutoff point, okay? The beginning of this decade. And what did we start with? The COVID. Took over 2 years of our lives. You know, life really came to a standstill. Enormous casualties, complete disruption of social fabric, huge economic consequences, and problems, scars which many societies bear even today. Now, as we were getting out of the COVID, 2 years later, we had a conflict that began in Ukraine, which people at that time thought would last days or weeks or perhaps at best a month. And we are now into its 5th year. Not just any old conflict, a conflict which actually has had tremendous global consequences. It has impacted food security, fertilizer security, definitely energy flows, and actually in many ways reshaped the geopolitics of a very important, very vital part of the world. Since then, we've had many other turbulent developments as well. On the economic side, I think the tariff volatility and market access issues have actually impacted international economy in a way in which we could not have conceived of. We've also seen in many ways a polarization of the world where whether it is on natural resources, critical minerals, technology, connectivity, and then last year we had a conflict in the Gulf. That itself came out of what happened in it. And through all of this, what we are seeing in other parts of the world which are not necessarily in the headlines, we are seeing that it's harder to trade, that social or education are less and less. And of course, a big challenge in all of this, accumulation of all these issues, is a big supply chain concern. That when every country looks out at the world, a big part of our concern is, have we secured our supplies? There could be supplies for our industry, supplies for our food security, as increasingly in the last few weeks and months, energy supplies. So I do think the term tough world, as we talked about yesterday, is, if anything, a bit of an understatement. Under their control. We are seeing today a weaponization of finance. We are seeing weaponization of resources, weaponization of technology, weaponization of connectivity, of geography, using market shares and their capabilities and their influence to actually obtain goals and exert influence in a manner in which we could not have imagined or planned for earlier. Not just that, the world itself in many ways, the metrics by which we measure the world, they have started changing. We used to think, for example, of the United States as a country for decades, primarily as an energy importer. Now the United States has actually become one of the world's largest energy exporter, and it has obviously very major policy consequences. We look at technology, and today we are poised at the beginning, you can say, of an AI era, looking at technology in its most intrusive form, that it's not just going to come right into our homes and shape our thinking. It is actually probably in the next few years going to change everything around us. There's no domain of activity which is not going to be impacted by AI. Or let me, as I said earlier, refer to connectivity. That the world is being reshaped by a new world which, whether we like it or not, is prepared to take greater risks. A world which is far more uncertain, a world which itself, I think for many countries, we would certainly, I think for India and Suriname, we would like to see it more inclusive. We would like to see sustainable growth. We would like to enjoy more respect in international politics. And in many cases, I would say, countries would say, we would like to have more influence. This is the progress which nations seek. So, if we are seeking those goals in more volatile, turbulent, uncertain times, what is the best way of doing that in international relations? And that is a question which each one of us will look at when we practice diplomacy. And I would advance that. It is a nation that would be flexible enough to join what today we would call for a particular purpose and a particular agenda. So life today is going beyond alliances. So you come together for, say, in a particular region for a set of agreed goals, and you have the openness to work with different countries to that end. It is a nation which would take a very responsible approach towards multilateralism, because at the end of the day, for whether multilateralism is perfect or not, the world is still better off with any form of multilateralism than the absence of it. And it is a country which finally, when it comes to the biggest of all issues, has a caring attitude towards the planet. That its approach towards the planet, the sustainability of the planet, and the health, the well-being of the planet and all the people is very, very strong. So to me, this would be a definition of what is a good partner. Now, good partner. Now, from a general principles, let me move to a very, very specific example. And again, I go back to COVID. The biggest challenge, if you remember, during COVID, after the initial wave when we sought to protect our peoples, we also PPEs and gloves and sanitizers and whatever was needed as an immediate response was for vaccines. Now, vaccines naturally were produced by a few countries, but were consumed by all. And what we had was a very interesting and, to my mind, a very revealing indication of national characters. There were countries who stockpiled vaccines. I remember one in particular, being from the diplomatic world, I won't mention its name, but they had actually vaccines for 8 times the population of that country. Clearly, it was not a developing country. You can guess that. And there were others who actually had no hope of getting anywhere near vaccines. And it wasn't just, the well-being at home, because if you all remember, the vaccination also became the basis for travel. So the absence of vaccines also meant, in a way, discrimination on travel and discrimination on economic activities. So it's kind of like a downward spiral. Now, at that time, India happened to be a country which actually sort of rose to the occasion, and we had a pharmaceutical industry which was able to churn out vaccines in very, very large numbers and with a very high degree of efficiency. We had also obligations, which obviously we fulfilled. And then when we looked at the world, I still remember my Prime Minister posing this question to us, saying, okay, we have started our vaccination, and we are a country of 1.4 billion plus. What about those who don't have access to vaccines, have no prospect of getting those vaccines? So how long do they wait, and do we have an obligation to do something about it? So to cut a long story short, we actually ended up supplying vaccines to a very large number of countries and to international initiatives, obviously, which were designed to distribute vaccines, almost at the very time when we began our own vaccination. So when I said one of the characteristics of a good partner is a nation which is able to harmonize its national interests with a commitment to global good, I put before you the experience of the COVID and the vaccine supply as a good example. But let me move on beyond that. COVID hopefully is a memory, maybe not a distant one. It still has its scars, but life has moved on. So today, which countries make good partners, and what should they do really to strengthen their credentials and really send that message of partnership? And sometimes, charity. In our case, a country, the most populous country, 1/6 of the world population. Perhaps a big contribution we can make to the world is starting by taking care of ourselves. Straight away deal with 1/6 of the challenges, perhaps more, facing the world. And while that's a general statement, let me give you a very specific number which would perhaps focus your attention. Growth is in short supply. But if you look at the IMF expectation of global growth this year, India contributes to the 17% of the total global growth. So when we look at what are we bringing to, what are we putting on the table, what is the contribution that India is making to the world today? One very important part of it is not just that, hey, these folks have 6.5% growth, what a wonderful thing. It is that growth is 17% of the global growth and is actually impacting the international economy as a whole. Now, when a country like us, an economy like us build more capacities, we also open up options for other partners. And I'll come to the importance of options. So, today for us, as we grow, we are very conscious. It's not just about us. Our growth today gives our partners, we help to de-risk the international economy. We help to give more possibilities. We are creating more options. We are ourselves, in many ways, adding to market possibilities and market access, and we are today negotiating and concluding more free trade agreements for countries to avail of it. And along with that, we are trying to create a global footprint so that our impact on the international economy and the de-risking of the world is as impactful, it's far-reaching as possible. So for us today, really, we don't think of any region as too far off. So as I said, Mr. Buffa yesterday, for us, you are a family just separated by a little bit of water and perhaps a little more. And India will, during its growth, not only make its presence felt in different parts of the world, but contribute to different regions in that process. Now, how do you contribute? Are sharing best practices, sharing experiences, in some cases even doing that in a very concrete manner through a project. Today, share that as a best practice with other parts of the world. That we pride ourselves today as a society which has actually been extremely enthusiastic in its embrace of the advantages of digital technology, to a point where, when it comes to the most basic of human activities, which is to buy and sell something, most Indians today don't carry a wallet. We carry a phone instead. Just last month, we recorded 22 billion cashless transactions, which is the highest in the world, which is about, I think, probably 4 or 5 times of what the United States does in a year. Or I give you a different example. We have all homes electrified. We have piped water into all homes. But we have created an industry with that capacity which can do that. Already had in the past water projects. But today our own industry in that domain has grown to a point where we can think of something far more ambitious. And in fact, there are renewables itself. India's shift to renewables in the last decade has been among the fastest in the world. So the short point is our partnership for progress. The assumption here is we are progressing, but it doesn't mean that we have to reach a certain level to share with what we have. What we have in terms of resources, what we have. There is a mismatch between demand and supply, particularly when it comes to human resources. If a country is to grow, and sometimes this happens, very has to look to augment its workforce. It will have to look for specialists or skills from a particular domain to plug a gap. Now, whether it's Russia, whether it's Japan, Malaysia, Actually, there are a range of countries where Indian skills and talents are making themselves, from our perspective, is a major contribution to global good. Now, life, of course, sometimes where as a first responder, we've actually pretty much in the Indian Ocean region tried to be among the earliest to respond, and we have created institutions which are dedicated to responding to humanitarian and disaster relief situations. So we actually have a disaster management authority. We have created a disaster relief force. So recently in our own neighborhood, we had a huge cyclone hit Sri Lanka. We were able, on the day of the cyclone, to a number of our neighbors were actually in deep economic distress. The most prominent case again was Sri Lanka, when on our part, they were engaged in some and we put on the table $4.5 billion package to help stabilize the Sri Lankan economy, which by the way was more than what they finally. Now, I mentioned that to you because these are going to be recurring situations in a tough world. Right now, many of our neighbors are struggling with, in a way, also take into consideration the requirements of a neighbor. That is actually a good work done for the international community. So moving on from there, the initiatives, the most prominent among them is the International Solar Alliance. There's also a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure to deal with climate events. There's the Global Biofuel Alliance. And even, recently we had an AI Impact Summit. Part of the, however you mark it, you celebrate it here. So for those who are in the foreign policy, in the diplomacy business, I do want to end on that note that it's a tough world, but we need progress, we need partnerships. They do exist. We'll certainly keep doing that with a high degree of commitment and determination. Thank you very much for your attention.